Hi you guys, it's Mimsy here. Are you thinking of making a fabric upholstered or slip-covered headboard? I just finished making this for my daughter's room, and I originally intended to make it a slipcover and ended up just doing it upholstery style and stapling it to the frame. So if you're thinking about making a fabric headboard, stick around, let's get started.
Okay, so first thing I want to just say is that this project is not a heirloom quality project or a bespoke headboard or anything like that. I'm just making this happen for my daughter to get her through high school, make her room look cute. Who knows if this style will even make it through high school. So just keep in mind that it's not perfect. But the first thing you're going to do is cut your foam to size, and then I washed and dried my fabric, because my intention was for this to be a slipcover and have it come off easily and washable. So I wanted to shrink it ahead of time. So now I'm pressing the fabric, and then I'm starting by cutting my fabric straight, square, and on grain so that my headboard fabric is not going to be wonky. And I have a separate video on that, and I will link to that above. And now I am making the welt that'll go around the top edges, both edges of the top of the headboard. So I always cut my welt on the bias, and by the way, I do have a video on making welt. It's specifically just for making welt, and I'll link to that in the cards above. So if you've never made welt, you can check out that video, and it'll give you step-by-step, real-time, detailed how to make welt. So I always cut my welt on a bias. So I fold it, and I use my rotary cutter to cut my bias strips. And then I need a new blade in my knife. It's getting very dull. And then you just take your bias strips and sew it together with the welt cording. Okay, so now this next part, I had intended to railroad my fabric so that it would reach all the way across from side to side on my headboard without having any seams, because I bought 2 yards, which is 72 inches, and my headboard is only 58 inches wide. And my fabric is 54 inches wide. Well, I had intended to railroad it and then forgot and cut it. So right here I'm sewing together the width of the headboard. So I'm sewing on 2 small pieces on each end of my headboard, see that, so that it'll make it all the way across. And you always want to have your full piece in the center of your piece. You never want to seam down the center. Okay, and now I'm pinning the welt on. I just set it right on top of my foam, and I'm just pinning the welt onto the edge of the front piece of fabric. And this is the corner. I'll bring you in close for this corner piece so you can see how you have to make a relief snip into the corner so that the welt will make it around the corner. So I'm just putting a crease in the welt in order to get it to bend around the corner. And had I not made that relief snip, it would not bend around that corner. And I'm putting another snip in there because I realized I didn't make that quite long enough. So I want that corner to be right exactly at the corner of my piece of foam. Okay, and once I get that corner exactly where I want it to be, I'll put some pins right up to the corner of that, and then I will go ahead and pin the welt all the way down the rest of the side. I do this part kind of by feeling, so I just lay the welt at the edge of the piece of foam and just feel that it's right at the edge and pin it right on the edge so that that piece of welt is straight down the edge of the foam. The sewing machine, and sew that welt onto my front piece. Okay, so this next part, I actually skipped the part where I cut out the boxing piece, which is the 4-inch strip of fabric that goes across the top and down the sides of the headboard between the 2 pieces of welt. And I had cut a bunch of pieces, short pieces, and had to sew them together because I was kind of out of fabric here. So I made that 4-inch strip, I sewed it onto the piece of welt and the front piece that was already there. And now I'm taking the second piece of welt and sewing it to the opposite side of the 4-inch boxing piece, so that I've got welt on both sides of that 4-inch boxing piece, which is that strip that will go across the top of the headboard at the front and at the back. So I like to sew this on with the welt on the bottom, so the welt is against my feed dog, and my boxing strip of fabric is under the presser foot. This way you don't get any of the shifting that I've talked about in some of my other videos, where the fabric shifts. If you have your welt against the feed dog and your fabric on top of that, you won't get any shifting in your fabric. So the last step is to sew on the back piece, but I'm going to make the frame first to make sure that I've got it fitting properly to the foam in the frame. So I have my 1x4s that I bought at Home Depot, and they're just the cheap 1x4 super strips. They're like $4 a piece. I used 3 of them to make the frame. One 8-foot piece I cut directly in half to make 48 inches, and that's what I'm doing right here, is cutting the first piece directly in half. And then the second 2 8-foot boards I cut to about 51 inches for the 2 cross pieces, the 2 horizontal pieces, one at the top and one about 20 inches below that, to support the foam and the luan. So now I'm cutting the 2 horizontal pieces, and then the next step is to fasten those together. So after I cut the 2 horizontal pieces, I'm going to use my Craig pocket hole kit in order to make pocket holes in the 2 horizontal pieces. So now I'm going to kind of dry fit that and measure it and make sure that I do have that the correct width, because your frame needs to be slightly smaller than the foam by about 1/2 inch. So about 1/4 inch or up to about 1/2 inch on each side. You want your foam to hang past the wood frame, because when you get your fabric on there, it will squish down the foam a little bit. So you want the foam to kind of overlap the wood. Otherwise that wood will stick out farther than your foam, and it's a harsh, hard edge, and you don't want that. You want your foam to overlap the wood a bit. That's how it is on all upholstery projects. You want your foam to hang over your wood about 1/4 inch up to about 1/2 inch all the way around. Like on seats, chair seats and everything, that's the way you want it, your foam to be hanging over. To go ahead and put in the pocket holes here, flipping it over because I want my rough side to be inside, because after I get this all assembled, I do put on a thin piece of luan plywood over the top of this, which I somehow neglected to show that part. So after this, once I get this all assembled, I do go ahead and put luan plywood on there, and then I glued the foam to the luan plywood. So you don't see that part, but that's how I did it. I used Gorilla adhesive to glue the foam to the plywood piece that I put on top of this frame. So I'm just using the Craig pocket hole jig to put holes in each of the 4 ends of the horizontal boards, and now I'm actually fastening them together with the pocket hole screws, which is like a wafer head screw. It's a big headed screw, and that's what holds the pieces together tight, is that wafer head screw that goes in there.
Okay, so I'm going to quick show you where I'm at today with this headboard. I changed up my plans, and I'm going to grab the camera and show you what I'm talking about. Yesterday, I built the frame. I attached the foam to the frame with the adhesive, and then I sewed the boxing pieces together. Let me change this so you can see it. Okay, and then I sewed so I had this sewn yesterday. I had the welt on yesterday. I sewed the boxing piece onto the welt, and then I sewed this piece of welt on, and then the back piece, and I'll go around back and see. But you see how it's like the welt is wavy up here, and it was kind of wavy down the side here.
So the front piece is fine. You know, my intention was for this to be a slipcover and have it so that it was removable and even reversible. Let me bring you around the back and show you. Okay, so the back I used a piece of white linen that I had because I only bought 2 yards of this Kate Spade fabric so that I could save money because I already had this. And my intention was to make this all just be able to slip right off and throw into the washing machine. Well, once I put the back on and put it back on here, I realized that the back, I would never probably turn this thing around and use the back because I just don't like the way that looks. The welt on the back piece is wavy for some reason. I don't know why. I could take it off and try to straighten it out or put a new piece on there, but I'm not that ambitious. I'm just trying to get this room done. So what I decided to do is, rather than make this a slipcover, I am just making it like upholstery and stapling it to the headboard. So as you can see down there, it is stapled to the wood. So let me lighten this up and show you better. I stapled the fabric to the underside of the headboard, and I will cut all this excess fabric off, tuck it under, then I'll paint the legs, and this will be done. Change of plans, that sometimes happens. And so with the staples in the back, let me go back to that real quick. Putting the staples in the back, you know, this is going to be up against the wall, so you'll never see this back part, and I already fit it in there and it's perfect. This fits right underneath the window, so I will put a couple more staples on the back of this just to straighten out this top piece of welt here so that it's not all wavy like that. So that was my change of plans. Sometimes you've got to just roll with it. The headboard is all finished and installed. I'm going to bring it in a little bit closer so you can get a look at how the details are up close. I'll show you how nicely it comes right to the top of the bed. Let me pull this blanket away and you can see how it fits the bed. The mattress needs to be pushed all the way up, but you see that? It's just perfect. The mattress comes in right underneath it. It's ideal. So that's how she looks, and I'm pretty happy with it. There's some areas that are a little bit wonky. You know, the welt on the top is not totally perfect, but it's good enough. The sides down on the legs, this part could be better, but I didn't want to. I suppose I could probably tuck that under like that and staple that, but when I did that out there, it kind of made this side part a little weird, so maybe I'll still do that. I don't know. I'm going to install curtains. I'm going to make curtains for my next project, and the curtains will be from, obviously, the curtain rod down the side of the window, so they'll end up like almost right to the edge of the bed, so I'm not really concerned about that part by the leg. So there it is. That's done deal. So don't forget, you guys, if you're willing to put in a little elbow grease, you can have a beautiful home on a very tight budget. So you can do it.